Good day everyone, especially Coach Jude Martinez. I am Jonathan Martinez and welcome to this video presentation. Today we are presenting the 14 learner-centered psychological principles. My role in this video presentation is to provide a general introduction to learner-centered psychological principles. Afterwards, we're going to share our insights at the end of our presentation. Introduction. Psychology has offered vital information for the design of schooling based on theory and research on human learning, development, and motivation throughout its history. During the last decade, education-related psychological research has been extremely fruitful. Improvements in teaching, learning, and the entire schooling enterprise can be directly attributed to advance in our understanding of thinking, memory, and cognitive and motivational processes. Introduction. Simultaneously, educators concerned about rising school dropout rates, low academic success, and other markers of school failure are advocating for more learner-centered schooling methods. Such models attend to the diversity among students and use this diversity to enrich learning and to produce results within the context of current school reform. The learner-centered psychological principles, which are consistent with more than a century of research on teaching and learning, are widely shared and implicitly recognized in many excellent programs found in today's school. They also combine research and practice in developmental, educational, experimental, social, clinical, organizational, community, and school psychology, among other fields. Furthermore, these ideas are based on conventional and scientific knowledge. They include not only learner-centered ideas that can lead to good schooling, but also principles that can contribute to positive mental health and productivity in our nation's children, teachers, and the system that supports them. The following 14 psychological principles pertain to the learner and the learning process. Rather than conditioned habits or physiological causes, they concentrate on psychological elements that are essentially internal to and under the control of the learner. The principles, on the other hand, make an attempt to take into account the external environment and contextual elements that interact with these internal components. Furthermore, the 14 principles are divided into those referring to cognitive and metacognitive, which has 6 principles, motivational and affective, which has 3 principles, developmental and social, which has 2 principles, and individual differences factors, which has 3 principles. These principles will be tackling each member of the group based on their assigned topics. Today, I will discuss about nature of the learning process, which falls under cognitive and metacognitive. So based on my research, learning is the process by which an individual acquires knowledge, attitudes, and skills that are necessary to meet the demands of life. While touching a burning candle, a child gets burned and he withdraws the fingers. When he faces a similar situation again, he withdraws his fingers faster. Gradually, he learns to avoid not only the burning candle but also other burning things. The behavior of an individual is thus changed through experiences. This change in behavior brought about by experiences is commonly known as learning. Thus, learning means change in behavior or behavior potential that occurs as a result of experience. Learning can result from both vicarious and direct experiences. Vicarious means observing someone and learning from that observation and not being directly involved in the experience. For example, a child learns how to clap hands by seeing someone else do it. Learning also takes place through direct experiences. For example, a child learns to write by practicing writing. A child normally learns from his parents, teachers, and the environment. Of learning. According to Gardner-Murphy, the term learning covers every modification in behavior to meet environmental requirements. While Henry P. Smith, learning is the acquisition of new behavior or the strengthening or weakening of old behavior as a result of experience. Crow and Crow stated that learning is the acquisition of habits, knowledge, and attitudes. It involves new ways of doing things and it operates in individuals' attempts to overcome obstacles or to adjust to new situations. It represents progressive change in behavior. It enables him to satisfy interests to attain goals. Of learning. According to the second principle is goals of the learning process. Based on my research, the successful learner over time and with support and instructional guidance can create meaningful, coherent representations of knowledge. The strategic nature of learning requires students to be goal-directed, to construct useful representations of knowledge and to acquire the thinking and learning strategies necessary for continued learning success across the lifespan. Students must generate and pursue personal relevant goals. Initially, students' short-term goals and learning may be sketchy in an area, but over time their understanding can be refined by filling gaps, resolving inconsistencies, and deepening their understanding of the subject matter so that they can reach longer-term goals. Educators can assist learners in creating meaningful learning goals that are consistent with both personal and educational aspirations and interests. These are the examples of personal and educational goals. Includes think positive to stay focused, stay resilient, make time to read, manage your time, find time to relax, strive for excellence, build a strong network, build good study, attend seminars, and develop patience to achieve your goals. The next principle that Kimberly was going to discuss was all about construction of knowledge and strategic thinking. Go ahead, Kimberly.
Good day, Coach Jude, and to my fellow classmates. Hi, I'm Kimberly Villacura, and let's tackle about construction of knowledge and strategic thinking. The construction of knowledge, when the successful learner can link new information with existing knowledge in a meaningful way. So how can you construct a knowledge? By the help of nature of learning progress and goals of learning process, you can easily widen your knowledge and deepen as a future educator and student. Continue to build links between new information and experiences and their existing knowledge base. Based on purcenter.yale.education.com, that the student learn by connecting new knowledge with knowledge and concept that they already know, thereby constructing a new meaning. NRC 2000. The strategic thinking. When you say strategic thinking, a successful learner can create a use a repertoire of thinking and reasoning, strategies to achieve complex and learning goals. Successful learners use in their approach to learning reasoning, problem solving, and concept learning. It done individually as well as collaboratively among people who can possibly alter an organization future. That's all. Thank you.
Coach, and good evening to my fellow classmates. I am Alexei Rustev from BTLED ICT 1D, and I will be discussing the two parts of the 14 learner-centered psychological principles. So, I will discussing the thinking about thinking. So, the description of thinking about thinking is a highly ordered strategies for selecting and monitoring mental operation, facilitate creativity and critical thinking, which means learner must be aware in their achievements or goal and their strategies in learning. For example, a student or a learner listening to the discussion of the teacher. So after the discussion, uh, uh, the learner or the student must ask her or himself if he gained enough knowledge to understand the lesson. So there is a two possible outcomes, which is the yes or no. If yes, there will be no changes in the learner's strategy of the learner. If no, the learner must find a way or think a way that he will gain the enough knowledge to understand the topic that discussing by the teacher. So it's just basically the thinking by thinking is the the learners to be practical, and the learners must think another way if they won't able to catch up the topic. And that's all for the this topic, and we'll go to the next topic. Next topic will be the context of learning. So the the description of context of learning is influenced by the environmental factors, including the culture, technology, and the instructional practices. So the context of learning talks about the equipment and the quality of teaching, and also the environment and the facilities. So you, for example, you can just imagine that students wasn't able to focus in your lesson to what you're teaching because of the surroundings, because the surroundings is very noisy. So that's one of the example of the context of the learning. So the second, which is the technology. So technology is really useful in this time of pandemic, because technology such as cell phone, laptop, and Wi-Fi. So the technology uses to communicate to each other and transfer knowledge using smartphones, right? So that's the second example of the context of learning. And the third one, which is the quality of teaching. So as a teacher, you need to enhance the quality of your teaching to the students, to able to gain the knowledge that what you have you what you want to teach to them. So it's just basically the context of learning is just talks about the facility and the environment, equipments of the certain place or the environment. And that's all. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Mary Ann Andico, and I am going to discuss the second category, which is the motivational and affective factors. So, the first principle under motivational and affective factors is motivational and emotional influences on learning. So, motivational and emotional factors influence or affect our learning. So, what and how much is learned influenced by the motivation. So, if we say motivation, it is the eagerness to learn something. Motivation to learn, in turn, is influenced by the individual's emotional states, belief, interests, goals, and habits of thinking. So, as a future educator, we need to help our students to develop motivation and emotional factors like avoiding negative emotions and be optimistic. So some example of emotional factors are anxiety, panic, and insecurity. So we don't need to pressure our students to avoid panic and anxiety. And also, we need to treat our students fairly and no favoritism to avoid insecurity inside the classroom. In this principle, it's more on developing cooperation and camaraderie rather than competence. And as a future educator, we need to encourage our students to be successful and not a failure. So, the eighth principle under motivational and affective factors is intrinsic motivation to learn. So, if we say intrinsic, it is the act of doing something without any obvious external rewards. So, the best example of this is when we choose our program, our course, so it is our passion, our wants, and not the wants of our parents. It is our own decision to choose this course and not by the other people. Intrinsic motivation is stimulated by tasks of optimal novelty and difficulty, relevant to personal interests and providing for personal choice and control. So, as I've said, it's your personal choice, not your parents or anybody. So, you strive hard for excellence and not expecting in return. And once you develop this principle within yourself, you're going to aim for excellence and success. So, the ninth principle under motivation and affective factors, which is the effects of motivation on effort. So, once you apply the seventh and eighth principle, you are motivated to learn intrinsically, and there is a huge impact on the level of effort that you have exerted. So, like choosing what course you will take, if it's your personal choice, so you are motivated to learn intrinsically because it's your desire. Acquisition of complex knowledge and skills requires extended learner effort and guided practice. So, without learners' motivation to learn, the willingness to exert this effort is unlikely without coercion. So, it is very important to have passion or you love what you're doing and there's a willingness because no one forced you to do it. You take this program because you love teaching and there is a passion within. So, of course, you can exert maximum effort and there will be a success. As a future educator, we need to exert effort to make our lessons interesting and relevant so that students will be more motivated. And also, we need to connect our lessons in real life situation and experiences so that students will be able to develop the relevance of the lesson. So we're done in 7, 8, and 9 principle under motivational and affective factors. So let's proceed to the third category, which is the developmental and social factors.
A blessed day to each every one of you. We will now continue the discussion on learning-centered psychological principles. My name is Nasana Abraja. We will be discussing about the developmental and social factors. 10. Developmental influences on learning. Learning is most effective when differential developmental within and across the physical, intellectual, emotional, and social domains is taken into account. So what do we mean by differential developmental is within and across of each individual physical, the intellectual, emotional, and the social domains. In our classroom, we will not just check their capacity on learning, but rather also their physical. For example, you have a student that's handicapped or PWD. So basically, you will take consideration on that. The physical aspect of the student that you may encounter in your life, such as the blurry eyes or can't hear well. So in that case, you will give another approach for them that they can still follow the flow of each specific lesson. Not totally 100% different from the other class, but just a little consideration for them. So let's go now in emotional. Emotional is really matter in classroom, not just the outside of the classroom, inside of the house, but also in the classroom. Another example, you have a student that very jolly, very active. Then once in a while, you will see their changes in attitude and behavior. So basically, you will also take consideration on this. As a teacher, you need to ask how they are, what's their problem, or maybe broken-hearted. And some students are very vocal. They will voice their problem to you, and that's the time you will do your job as a teacher. And lastly, their social domains. This is where you check if they do participation in their classroom, then know how to interact with other students or in their classmates. So it is also part that you will consider it. Individuals learn best when material is appropriate to their developmental level and is presented in an enjoyable and interesting way. So where is the need to be teacher to be an entertainment person too? So knowledge on the physical, intellectual, the emotional and social domains of learners is an excellent springboard for planning learning activities, materials, and assessment. So of course, if you have already idea about your student, their physical, intellectual, their capability in learning, how they will act according to your action, their level. So after knowing those, that's the time you will create a way that is effective for them. You will provide appropriate materials for learning activities and assessment in an enjoyable or interesting way. Example of this, you will be teaching in a low level, or let's say in a grade 1. So in this little classroom, you can use just a chalk, then talk in front of them in a whole day. Why? Because there's a tendency that a student will fall asleep, get bored on your lessons. Then that's the time you will be creative, like bringing a picture or a shape. Then you will ask your student, 1 apple plus 1 apple, what's the answer? So in that situation, the student's attention is yours. So they will really cooperating, they will really participating in your classroom. But of course, if you have already in a high level, you don't need to be like this because it sounds childish for them. So you will create another way that interesting also for them. So let's proceed to the second one. 11. Social influences on learning. So learning can be enhanced when the learner has an opportunity to interact and to collaborate with others in an instructional task. So it's a learning that influenced by social interaction, interpersonal relations, and communicating with others. So how important that having communication with others is. In this generation, we are now in a 21st century learner, and then into our generation, collaboration is a 21st century skill. All learners should learn the skill of working with others in an instructional setting. This ability will prepare them for the real world where they are expected to interact effectively to a community diverse of people. It says reality-wise. When you give an individual work when they are in their career path they want, they really also need to interact with different people. So we enlighten this. Community is a diverse people. Like everyone's belief, when you graduated from college or received diploma, that's the end point of the finish line. But it's the starting point of your life. This is where you grow, where you start, another chapter will be open. So for example, in school, you will be encounter different faculty members, different administrators, and by them or having interaction or communication with them, you will be also expecting learning new ideas for them. This is where you made them feel that they do not have to stand alone just to live the real world. Let's connect this in school. For the learning activity in classroom, you should offer opportunities for such collaborative skills, such as group work, group dynamics, allowing brainstorming with others, as well as group tasks are commonly example of this situation where chats can be developed. So how come group tasks is an effective way approach on learning? So it is simply that arguing with someone taught idea, it will be great principle for each of the learner to learn new ideas or discover new knowledge. So by just sharing their idea to one another, they will brainstorm it, comparing your answer or reviewing as a group, as simple as that. So therefore, this developmental influence and social influence on learning are considered as the process of learning. That's the end of my discussion. So another topic will be discussed. Thank you.
A pleasant day to you, Coach Jude Martinez, and to my fellow classmate. I'm Krisha Lauhari, and I'm going to discuss the individual differences factor. 12. Individual differences in learning. Learners have different strategies, approaches, and capabilities for learning that are a function of prior experience and heredity. We all know that individual students are born with and develop their own capabilities and talents. In addition, through learning and social beliefs, they have acquired their own preferences for how they like to learn and the pace at which they learn. However, these preferences are not always useful in helping learners reach their learning goals. As future educator, I need to help students examine their learning preferences and expand or modify them if necessary. The interaction between learner differences and curricular and environmental condition is another key factor affecting learning outcomes. Educators need to be sensitive to individual differences in general. We also, as future educator, must also need to attend to learner perceptions of the degree to which these differences are accepted and adapted to by varying instructional methods and materials. Learning and diversity. When we said diversity, it is the range of human differences. Learning is most effective when differences in learners, linguistic, cultural, and social background are taken into account. The same basic principles of learning, motivation, and effective instruction apply to all learners. However, language, ethnicity, race, beliefs, and socioeconomic status all can influence learning. We as future educators, we must be careful in giving attention to these factors in the instructional setting enhances the possibilities for designing and implementing appropriate learning environments. When learners perceive that their individual differences in abilities, backgrounds, cultures, and experiences are valued, respected, and accommodated in learning tasks and contexts, levels of motivation and achievement are enhanced. Standard and assessment. When we said assessment, it is to gather relevant information about our student performance or progress. Setting appropriately high and challenging standards and assessing the learner as well as learning progress, including diagnostic, process, and outcome assessment, are integral parts of the learning process. Assessment provides important information to both the learner and teacher at all stages of learning process. Effective learning takes place when learners feel challenged to work toward appropriately high goals. Therefore, appraisal of the learner's cognitive strengths and weaknesses as well as current knowledge and skill is important for the selection of instructional materials of an optimal degree of difficulty. Ongoing assessment of the learners understand of the curricular material and can provide valuable feedback to both learners and teachers about progress toward the learning goals. Standardized assessment of learner progress and outcome assessments provide one type of information about achievement levels both within and across individuals that can inform various types of programmatic decisions. Performance assessment can provide other sources of information about the attainment of learning outcomes. Self-assessment of learning progress can also improve students' self-appraisal skill and enhance motivation and self-directed learning. In summary, individual differences are found in all psychological characteristics, physical, mental abilities, knowledge, habit, personality, and character traits. As a future educator, perhaps the first task of us teacher in a class should be to know and study individual differences among our pupils. That's all and thank you.
Studying the 14 learner-centered psychological principles, so I was able to gain, gain some strategies how to manage to facilitate on students or a learner in a classroom. So I will master each principles too, and use it as my guide to my journey to become a future educator and to become a good future teacher in the future. And that's all. Thank you.
From my perspective, the 14 principles are essential for every student nowadays to know what each principle means and the objectives that need to be recognized. As a future educator, some of these principles are related to teaching, which we can use to apply in the near future. Additionally, understanding these principles has a big impact to every learner, particularly to those students who are taking a career of education, to equip us with knowledge and to be aware of what would be the teaching methods used based on the principles that authors provided.
As an education student, and future educator, these principles will serve as my guide and basis to perform well my responsibilities. I will make sure the main goal of these principles will be well executed as I practice my teaching profession. I can provide an assurance to my future student that I can boost and develop instructional materials and teaching strategies. The critical thinking, active personalities, and friendly attitude are the only some example of development that I can surely provide to them, same as the main goal of psychological principles. But aside on that, I will ensure to myself that I will motivate them to pursue and finish their studies well excellence.
Learner-centered psychological principles provide a framework for developing and incorporating the components of new designs for schooling. These principles emphasize the active and reflective nature of learning and learners. In summary, learner-centered education helps the students develop skills that will better equip them for their professional careers. Teacher can be trained in this approach so they can apply the principles and provide their students with a better learning experiences.